Campos.
I have a question. Would it be appropriate to forward the list of goods that we would like to the city manager? I think it'd be a little redundant to list the 50 projects I have. Mr. City Manager, would that be okay?
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Campos, certainly that is appropriate, but I think it's, the most important thing is that it be discussed in this body so that there can be a determination of consensus to go forward as opposed to an individual's list. It's vital that we well, it's vital according to my plan, that we come back with some sort of consensus idea as to how to proceed so that you are in a position that you can take some action last week. So to have an idea that hasn't been discussed amongst the body might be a little bit more difficult next week.
Very good, thank you.
Mr. Harmon.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm going to focus my remarks just this time just on the Eco-Devo portion of the funding. This is it's a little frustrating because as we look at this, we don't have numbers or percentages or anything, so we're just it's still pretty nebulous and there's very little detail. But in terms of economic development in general, I think the sales tax generally has been positive in terms of how it's been used here in Topeka and Shawnee County. I think, though, and this is one reason why I thought that the spring of 15 would be the earliest, because I think we need to, I think we owe it to the voters and the taxpayers that we step back and examine how we do economic development in this county. The current model has essentially functioned as a land bank in terms of acquiring properties and then encouraging businesses to come to our community with the grant of that land. And that's how we acquired the Home Depot Distribution Center, the Target Distribution Center, Mars, and the bakery. All those are great additions to our community, and I think that our economic development dollars were well served. However, looking forward for the next 10 to 15 years, I think we need to take a step back and say, well, is this model for economic development that we've been using for the last 15 years, is it still the cutting edge? Are we getting the most bang for our buck in terms of how we use those Eco-Devo dollars? Every year we take an inner city visit to a community, and a lot of the communities that we've examined, they are thriving because they have developed kind of a entrepreneur, high-tech type of businesses. And I throw that out there because I wonder if maybe we need to be looking to see if maybe we could funnel some of these Eco-Devo dollars into some of these new businesses, the high-tech, rather than simply function as a land bank. I'm not an Eco-Devo guy, but I think we owe it to the taxpayers to say, okay, you know, we're going to take a look at this because we want to make sure that if we're going to ask you to dip into your pocket for the next 10 to 15 years for economic development, we owe them an explanation and a justification that how we're going to use that money is appropriate, you know, or whether we're just relying on a model that perhaps is somewhat outdated. So I would hope that we could use the time before this actually comes to a vote to really work to see what is the best use of those tax dollars for Eco-Devo going forward. Thank you.
And I would like to add an addendum on with that, and I agree with what you're saying. And in working with Go Topeka, everyone is aware of those new companies that came in that you described. Approximately about the same amount is spent on current employers. You know, we did Goodyear, Santa Fe. Goodyear is still here because of the incentives. I shouldn't say that. I can't say they wouldn't be here, but they certainly are at the same level. The Santa Fe shops have been totally rebuilt. Del Monte, Consolidated Foods, they're always hard to remember because they're not the stars that we see. But I don't want people to think they only put money into bringing in those new products. They also put a sizable amount into maintaining the ones we have. And your last note is very well taken. And this year, for the first time, Topeka is really pushing the entrepreneur development, putting money there. And actually, tomorrow they are making a presentation to Washburn Tech to help train the appropriate skilled people for the plants we need. So it's moving. There is some change taking place. I'm not denying that we have to continue to look at it. But I think there are some good changes taking place in the last few years because of a lot of the members here have expressed those views that economic development should be changed. Council Deputy Mayor.
That's good. Thank you, Mayor, for that explanation. That's helpful, but I kind of concur with Councilman Harmon in the sense of I think we do need to kind of relook at what we're doing with economic development, and I hope that we are. That's a good idea. Personally, from my side of the city, I see infrastructure as economic development because the lack of California Avenue and some things that haven't been done, I think has really hurt business development in some areas. And I'm sure my district isn't the only district that's experienced that. So I think we, not that we shouldn't have dollars for economic development, but I think this is backwards. I think that infrastructure should have been, number A. So, and I'm just making that comment. I'm not picking this apart. It's just that what I have heard most from people in my district is they could be supportive, and of course it'll be up to them how they vote, but infrastructure is key, and I think that really does help bring businesses in. It's kind of if you build it, they will come, because if there's no road for them to get to a section of town, they're not going to wait till you build it. They go somewhere where there is good roads. So that's to me very key.
And I think on that point, the current half-cent sales tax is only on economic development and infrastructure. Those are the only two parts to it. Nathan, Mr. Schmidt, and then Mr. Leisler.
The inherent vice of capitalism is the sharing of blessings. The inherent virtue of socialism is the sharing of miseries. The equal sharing of miseries and the unequal sharing of blessings. Winston Churchill. I think that was the quote that you were looking for. and I think that's very applicable here, and it's an issue that I've expressed at meetings in the past, is that a half-cent sales tax, particularly countywide half-cent sales tax, is a regressive form of taxation. I am uncomfortable with doing general basic maintenance, infrastructure maintenance, with sales tax derived dollars. Ballot initiative sales taxes are very useful for projects. They're very useful for dire infrastructure needs like the Topeka Boulevard Bridge. And I'm okay with allocating some portion of these funds to that. But the failure to have quality streets and sidewalks is a failure of government. And if you fail in the basic role of providing that infrastructure, that's not something that we should put on the backs of those least able to afford it. So in that sense, I would disagree and say that I think economic development does fit into the kind of category of something that should be funded by a ballot initiative half-cent sales tax, and not necessarily the infrastructure. And I think we do need to work on the core of the city. And I think there was a great point made earlier about the massive expansion in land size of this city and the very small, in comparison, advancement of population. Those are the kinds of things that we need to work on, and we need to work on both aspects of that. We need to work on increasing the expansion of population while maybe decreasing the amount of land that we're grabbing on the perimeter. And I think we do that with economic development. I agree with Mayor Wolgast that there has been a change in direction in Jado and with regard to economic development in this community. I think there's a lot of excitement around bringing economic development to the core of this city, with downtown, with NOTO, with all of the projects going on at Washburn, and the traditional core of this city. So I think that is something that is important. I think that's something that needs to be emphasized. I think the quality of life issues, the Expo Center is a huge stimulus for this community. There are over 700 events there every year. It brings in a lot of money to this community, and it is old and it is falling apart. And it needs some money. It needs some funding. I support the idea of funds going to that, and I support, I love the concept of paying for things as you go, and I try to do that in my own life, but sometimes you have to buy a house, and I don't make quite enough money to be able to just write a check for that. The Expo Center is something like that. I would be okay with bonding that out, and that is going to take, you know, I understand an increased number of years to pay for that. The zoo, walking, biking trails are also both A and B on this question list. Those are both economic development items in that they improve the quality of life and help us attract people to this community. They improve the health of this community, which lowers healthcare costs, creates more vitality, and in turn spurs economic development. Those are my thoughts on A and B, and I'll pause for now.
Your first comment was about streets. And
My first comment was the Churchill quote, but
That's, excuse me. I missed it. You won't repeat it. Just making sure, you said about the streets that not maintenance, but it would be, you would be for construction. In the previous one, you know, we had a list of streets or roads that were built.
correct.
That's what you see rather than the maintenance process.
I see that as a limited ability. Street maintenance is something that we should pay for out of general revenue funds, or normal funds, not special ballot initiatives, is the way I see that.
Right. I was just wanted to clarify that point. There was someone, Mr. Leesla.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that one of the things that concerns me a lot when I hear the term economic development tossed around, it's almost like it's a bad word, a taboo word. And I think that the first thing that we have to focus on is that economic development, development of funding, development of revenues, it all comes from people. And in order for us as a city to become strong, we have to ensure that the core of our city remains strong and that people are moving into our city and not moving outside of our city. And the only way that we're going to ensure that that's going to happen is if we look at economic development from a holistic approach. And when we look at that from the approach of ensuring that we have the proper quality of life, so that when employers are trying to go ahead and talk about Topeka, that actually people move into Topeka and don't move into the county. No offense to the county, but they don't move into the county or into adjacent cities. We are doing ourselves a service. I tend to agree with my colleague, Mr. Manspeaker, in the sense that I have seen what's going on in the center of the city. And I see what's happening not only in the center of the city, but I also see what's happening in Oakland and in other areas. And if as a city cohesively, we do not work on improving the quality of life in all of the areas that are inside of the city, what's gonna end up happening is that people are not gonna want to live in the city, and we're gonna continue to have that bleeding out. This is going to then increase our revenues, and then we can start focusing on how do we increase, like Mr. Campos was saying, our sidewalks? How do we ensure that we have proper roads? In addition to that, the other thing that I feel that we should be looking at is our downtown. We are investing a bunch of money into our downtown. How do those economic development dollars get funneled into growing economic development right in that area, which is the core, the center? Again, people are saying that they want to come to Topeka, they want to have fun, they want to come to the corridor that represents the center and symbol of our community. In addition to that, one of the things that I'm very interested in seeing these economic development funds being utilized in is education. I know that there has been a turn with regards to the Chamber of Commerce. They did a presentation about what's happening in robotics at Highland Park. I see what's occurring as well in Washburn Tech. But I think that we do need to have a serious focus on how we're going to invest Ms. Ortiz on a regular basis is imploring us to look at what's happening with youth. And I think that we would be remiss if we take a look at how we could use those economic development funds to ensure that our youth are able to just explore themselves as entrepreneurs. There's many programs that we could look at. We don't like to talk about the bigger cities, but Kansas City the Kauffman Foundation has amazing programs in which they have youth constantly involved in getting their heads running and how to develop businesses and how to be technologically savvy. Further, the other thing that I would love to see an emphasis on is on small businesses. Out of the $5 million that are received by the Chamber of Commerce, $500,000 are to be used in small business development. In my first meeting, I heard that only 42 people were serviced. That money is never completely utilized. It would be wonderful to see an emphasis on small businesses and to ensure that not only are we attracting small businesses in different areas, but also that we are supporting the small businesses that are existent. Finally, I would like to also provide my support for the Expo Center. I think that it is in dire need of repairs. And I know that I've made several questions with regards to how much money we were losing and how many events we lost because we don't have the proper size and the structures that we need in order to ensure that we have those activities here in our community that are filling up our rooms. And I think that we should take a serious look at how we ensure that again, that's something else that's in the core of our city, that we invest in that as well. Thank you.
Yes. Deputy Mayor?
Very quickly, I didn't want to exclude the other things. I'll be real quick. I think infrastructure is important, but that's mostly on constructing or expanding, not on maintenance. But I also think the Expo Center and the zoo are important. And we heard a lot about that, and I would concur that those are both things that bring dollars into the city. So it's worthwhile. So I would certainly be supportive of that, as well as infrastructure being on the ballot for the people to decide.
Okay, Mrs. Hiller.
Where are we?
We're on, what would we support for
Working our
funding?
way through number 4, okay.
Yeah,
I
think
did put together some suggestions. My heart is not set on them, but it sounds like many people are ready to have something to look at and push and pull against. So I'll pass these around, and then if I could go through briefly and explain what I did. While those are coming around, I did visit with, had reason to be visiting with Kevin Cook, the chair of JADO today. And one of the recommendations that could come out of this group is to suggest that we spend time at JADO discussing economic development models and extending the conversation that has started here a little further. I think he'd be very open to that as far as the agendas. And then we'd be talking with the county commissioners as well. Does everybody have one? What you have on the front page is 2 alternates. Again, just stubbed in, anybody could change whatever they want. I think they do reflect the conversation today. Overall, that proposal estimates that we'd get about 16 million a year in over 12 years, that it would be done in cash. That totals 195 million. The first alternate, there's an alternate A and B, has the bikeways and trails. The estimates from staff are that we need about 40 million to finish them. That's about 3.5 million for the bikeways itself in the city, and 35 million plus bridges and some of the more expensive elements for the trail system as we've all seen it laid out. What I stubbed in was 30 million toward that. That would be so that we could actually complete the whole system. One of the things we do is start and work on it. The Shunga Trail, to the extent that it is today, is 40 years in the making. So that's enough to complete that system, assuming there's grants and MASH money. The Carlson Road Bridge, better known as the Willard Bridge, that's one the county has been struggling with. It's expensive. That's stubbed in at 20 million. Again, that is cash. In the case of that bridge, they have, as I understand it, been told there's a chance that the federal government would pick it up if it becomes so imminently dangerous that it would fall down, but no one knows when that would happen. They have been offered, however, interest-free financing through the state, so cash only would work for that and allow them to do it early in a 12-year run. City streets, I put on the second page. I just itemized from the list that Public Works gave us, but put 30 million in for city streets. I did add 2 on my own, which you'll see on the second page, and that is, interestingly enough, North Tyler that Ms. Miller emailed in about, as well as Rio. That whole Highway 24 intersection and the problems on North Tyler are major. So I personally stubbed those in. They could stay or go, but 30 million for city streets with cash. We had a lot of comments about the zoo. My understanding is that if the taxpayers were willing to support 9.8 million, that would cover their phase 1 of their master plan, and that FOTZ has made a commitment that if that did happen, they would cover the next 9.8 million, which seemed like a pretty good deal. The Expo Center, including the Domer Arena, I put in at 45 million. Economic development, to be determined at the 5 million a year it is now, that totals the 195. If people wanted to narrow in to much more strictly streets, the alternate B leaves the bikeways and trails in, ups the city street projects to 60 million, the Expo Center at 45 million, and economic development. So you can see how those 2 would go. On the second page, you can see some detailing in how that cash versus bonding savings would occur. Other possibilities down at the bottom half of that second page, sidewalks did come up. They came up loud and clear in the second hearing. And we've talked about them otherwise too, and put a little bit in our CIP. Again, we bond it when we put infill sidewalks in out of the CIP. I just sat back and looked at money and how much the sales tax generates. One of the things that we learned, for instance, going on some of the inner city visits, like in Oklahoma City, is sometimes they do very short and very focused sales tax commitments, and sometimes they're longer. If we, for instance, set aside, voted, our city voters in this case, voted for 1/20th of a cent, 0.05, for 2 years, it would yield $2.6 million, with which we could do 100 to 250 blocks of sidewalks citywide in 2 years. So just thinking about that, you could take any one of these projects and split it out that way as well. But, you know, I don't know that the county's ready to put sidewalks in a countywide issue, but 0.05 of a cent, 1.3 million a year, that's a lot of sidewalks. Also, if we did the plan as proposed on page 1, we would be moving street projects that otherwise we might have had in our CIP, which we typically bond. I looked at the list of streets and estimated that it would be, if you just count on alternate A, it would be over 2.5 million a year that otherwise would be in our CIP that we've capped at $9 million. If this passed, if we as a council chose to vote to lower our CIP cap corresponding to what was going to be in the sales tax, we could drop it to 6.5 or 7 million a year instead of the 9. We probably couldn't do it forever just because of election cycles. But in 4 years, we would have dropped our annual expenses out of the city operating budget by $1 million at least, which is a mill. Right now, we have 8 mills a year in our operating budget that goes to paying off debt, just the interest part of debt service. So we could correspondingly cut back on our property tax obligations if we did this.
Okay.
That's my proposal,
Appreciate-
just to think about.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And the background work you did on it. On our resolution, and then what we would be conveying to the county will be more in the line of, I don't know if you want to use generalities or sort of answers to these 4 questions that you have here, rather than specific amounts of funding. Is that the way you see it, Mr. City Manager? I'm not trying to set you up entirely, but just, you know, where we are on what we're really looking at as we bring this to a close.
Mr. Mayor, and to make a very general statement, the resolution as presented and ultimately adopted by this council is going to represent the level of comfort that this body feels going forward. I believe with the information that we've collected, which I think would be safe to say has been all over the board, we will we will represent a general overview of things that are preferred. We will go back and continue to look at the notes and see if we can provide a level of specifics to the degree that we can, based on what was discussed today. And then you will have it, I hope, in your hands by the end of the day tomorrow, and you can review it, think about it, and then when we come back, I'm assuming we're coming back next week with it, and then you can have a clarifying discussion and ultimately decide. But we'll do our best to capture what was discussed this evening.
And then we could make amendments for instance, what is the length of the tax? You put in X years and somebody can move to change that to, and then it's just an up or down vote, right?
Mr. Mayor, absolutely. The concept here is that we would present a draft based on the best capture of information that we could. You would then either accept, amend, or reject.
All right, okay. Let's think in terms of final statements in the next 4 or 5 minutes, and then we'll end this item. Mr. Smith?
I
Mr.
just
Harmon?
wanted to add one point to what he just, what the city manager just stated. We can also, in the resolution, say something like, this tax shall extend for no more than 15 years, correct? We don't have to give a specific amount of time.
Mr. Mayor and Councilmember Schmidt, you can say whatever this body chooses to, as a body, say, understanding that the ballot language specifically is going to be drafted by the county. We then would have the next task of entering into an interlocal agreement. If there was a substantial departure from what the city stated that was important to them and what was presented in the county ballot language, I think the interlocal agreement would become a little bit more difficult.
Right. As long as you get if you get 5 votes, it'll be in. All right. Mr. Harmon?
Thank you, Your Honor. I want to talk just a little bit about the Expo Center. I nearly gagged when I saw 45 million. I remember the discussion in this community when we decided that we needed to replace the municipal auditorium, which is we're sitting on top of it, for a multi-use civic center. And there was quite a bit of discussion about the need for it and where to put it. And the first choice was to put it downtown where the jail is. We ended up putting it on the fairgrounds, not because that was the first choice or the best choice, but it just seemed to be the least objectionable site for it. The expectation was that the Expo Center, or the Civic Center, we hadn't really named it at that point, would become a multi-purpose event arena. And first of all, let me step back and say nothing I say should be construed as criticism of anybody. I'm not criticizing the county commission, past or present. I'm not criticizing the management group. I'm certainly not criticizing H.R. Cook and his staff. They do a wonderful job with the venue that they have. But the Expo Center was built on the cheap. It has not been the performance venue that I think the majority of the citizens thought it was going to be. I attended one concert at the Expo Center, and that's when Kenny Rogers opened it. I don't know if any of you remember that. That's the last concert I attended because the acoustics are so poor in that building. In fact, I can count on one hand how many events I've attended at the Expo Center arena, and 2 of those were for funerals. When we had the public hearing on April 21st, the following people spoke in favor of Expo Center enhancements: Topeka Lodging Association, Tractor Pull Association, Visit Topeka, Kansas Horse Council, Horse Association, Horse Association. When you look at the calendar, the Expo Center calendar that came out for May and June, here are the events: 4-H Livestock Show, Sunflower Kennel Club Dog Show, State Barrel Horse Championships, Walmart Truck Driving Championships, football, Kansas Buckskin Show, Taekwondo Tournament, 4-H Horse Show, another 4-H Horse Show, cowboy dressage. I have no idea what that is. State High School Rodeo Finals, Volleyball Tournament, Hunter and Jumpers Horse Show, KMCA Truck Driving Championships, Kansas Buckskin Show. These are all good events. I'm not criticizing any of the events, and I'm not criticizing people who attend those events. But is that really what the voters intended when we built the Expo Center? It's appealing to a very limited, narrow group, broadly defined as agricultural, livestock, equestrian. Here's what I would like to see us do. I'm just throwing this out. I haven't talked to anybody about it. It seems like the niche that H.R. Cook and his staff have carved out for the Expo Center, and it's a very unique niche, is to appeal to the livestock, agricultural, equestrian events. Why not put some money in the Expo Center to make it a world-class equestrian livestock arena pavilion? And then if we decide as a community that we want an event arena, a true event arena like Sprint Center on a much smaller scale, we consider putting that in downtown Topeka. We've got a lot of synergy in downtown Topeka with NOTO, with the Kansas Avenue project, and with the Polk Quincy Viaduct realignment. If we want an event center, rather than modifying the Expo Center to make it a better event center, let it focus on the agricultural livestock exhibits, and let's think about putting an event arena in downtown Topeka or adjacent to downtown Topeka. Just like Sprint Center did, just like Century 2 did in Wichita. They put those event centers next to the downtown, and I think we would see development boom, just like the Power and Light District did next to the Sprint Center. So, again, this is another reason why I wanted us to postpone the vote, so that we could have some time for a community to begin having that discussion as to what they want in terms of a multi-purpose event center and what they want to see for the future use of the Expo Center. We're kind of at a crossroads here with respect to the Expo Center and to a community center, and I think it's time that we step back and get the community more involved in what they would like to see going forward before we just blindly put $45 million into the current Expo Center. That I have a real problem with, so, thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Other comments? We're wrapping. Ms. Hiller?
I do think the voters made it very clear the last time there was a sales tax election, and even on this one before, that they wanted to know specifically what they were voting on. I think even if it turns out the dollars don't go on the ballot itself, I do think it's very important for us to add up the numbers, to have the item and the price tag in what goes forward and what gets presented to the voters, so that it's clear what we're spending on what. It can be groups like the streets. Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no more discussion on this item, we will declare it complete. And I'm going to declare about a 10-minute break before we begin item B. It's 8:03, so let's shoot for 8:13 to begin.